on the 8th of August, our church celebrates the feast day of Saint Anastasios of Thessalonica. The following are some details on his life and works. Anastasios was a mild-mannered Greek youth of 20 when he worked in a gun shop in his native Thessalonica, in a business which prospered despite severe government restrictions and outrageous taxes which Greeks but not Turks were required to pay. The business resourcefulness and expertise of the Greek merchant were honed to a fine edge in being able to compete in an unfair market, whatever the nature of the enterprise. Anastasios played no small part in his company's prosperity, without ever having to circumvent the law in the unfavourable climate in which Greek merchants were forced to operate. Among the many biased taxes that tilted success in the direction of the Turks was one which heavily taxed any merchandise leaving the city, as though it were being exported to another country. To enforce this Turkish discriminatory tax, there were posted at all points leaving the city Turkish guards who allowed their fellow Turks to come and go freely, but who pounced on Greek cargo with a vengeance. On one occasion, the owner of the gun shop received a comparatively large order outside of Thessalonica, but one which he could not fill at a profit with the unusual high tax that would be imposed. The Greek buyer was willing to pay a more than fair price in order to do business with his countrymen, but even at that rate the tax gouge would have more than eliminated the profit. Getting past this virtual blockade with such a quantity of goods was well nigh impossible, and as the shop owner pondered the situation, he came up with a simple but very risky idea. Knowing Anastasios to be his most loyal as well as his most courageous employee, he summoned him to his office and asked him to disguise himself as a Turk and thereby transport the goods out of the city duty-free. Anastasios hesitated, even when promised a bonus, but after some deliberation he agreed to take the risk, mostly out of loyalty to his employer. He clad himself in Turkish dress, and with a prayer on his lips, he made for the check post with the cargo. Anastasios had no trouble with the Turkish lung, but his imitation of a Turk did not go beyond that, save for his apparel. Noting the blue eyes particularly, a suspicious Turkish guard asked him to call out the Muslim Salavati, known to all Muslims. This he had not anticipated, and was unable to recite it. Taken down from his wagon, the goods were confiscated and he was taken to jail. An evasion of taxes under any other circumstances might have called for no more than a stiff fine, but since Anastasios had passed himself to be a Muslim, the offence was much more grievous, and a Turkish court, huddled in deliberation before the chief magistrate, finally pronounced the charge and consequences. It was announced somewhat scornfully that since Anastasios was so anxious to become Muslim under false pretense, he could right that wrong by becoming one for all time. This failing, the charge would be treason and the penalty death. Without a moment's hesitation, the valiant Christian said he would rather die than disavow Christ. Not only that, he would not turn his back on the Greek Orthodox Church and bow towards Mecca. Cast into jail, Anastasios, then only 20 years old, was beaten unmercifully and subjected to all manner of brutality. He practically shouted out at his captors that if this was an example of Muslim mercy and justice, he would prefer to worship cobras. Infuriated jailers set upon him with a vengeance, and he was brutalized until there was little life in this once strong young man. He was ordered dragged to the gallows, but he cheated the hangman, dying before a noose could be placed around his neck. A little more than a quarter of a century before the Turks were expelled from Thessalonica, Anastasios died for Christ on the 8th of August 1894.